All right, right now, fantasy football points are at a premium. A bunch of random guys every given week putting up huge numbers. You need stable, consistent performance from your quarterback. You need guys willing to go out there and go balls deep. Throw balls deep. That's what's going to help propel you to fantasy football wins. And that's what we're looking for right now in Week 8. What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully you guys are all doing well out there. Welcome back to the Draft.com studios, where today we're talking about quarterbacks who we starting and sitting for Week 8 fantasy football. And we're going to get right into the matchups here really quick. But before we do, it's time to be a little transparent. How did we do in that crazy Week 7? Let's look at some of the numbers. All right, here we go. Week 7 for the quarterback numbers. Had a total of 26 quarterbacks that we gave a start or sit designation to. Out of those 26, 15 were correctly guessed for an accuracy percentage of 58%. Some big names really underperformed there in Week 7. Some of our biggest hits: Andy Dalton, Jacoby Brissett. Ryan Tannehill was a surprise. Had him as a start last week, and he did perform. Gardner Minshew also. Some of the misses, some big names that you would really expect to break that 18-point threshold, did not do it there in Week 7. Matt Ryan, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, and Carson Wentz all disappointed back in Week 7 and contributed to that 58% accuracy rating. Thanks for nothing, big-name quarterbacks. But hey, now let's get into Week 8. Let's see if we can figure out what's going on here and who the best starts and sits are for this week's matchups. All right, Thursday Night Football, first matchup, Redskins and Vikings. Going to go ahead and start Kirk Cousins here once again. Ever since they kind of had that come to Jesus talk a few weeks ago about really opening up the passing game, Kirk Cousins has really turned the corner. Now, yes, he is without Adam Thielen this week, but Olabisi Johnson, maybe a little bit more passing work from the run game, and Dalvin Cook really helped put him over the edge in a great matchup going up against the Washington Redskins right now, who allowed just under 19 fantasy points a game to opposing quarterbacks. So I'm going to go ahead and start Kirk Cousins. For Case Keenum, I'm a little worried. I like Case Keenum and Terry McLaurin together. But outside of that, there's really not a whole lot to build off in this offense. There could be times where they could struggle. Now, yes, last week, Matthew Stafford, Marvin Jones annihilated the secondary. But really, it's only Terry McLaurin that they have to worry about. I still like that matchup. I still think Terry McLaurin has a decent game, but not enough upside here for me to really want to start Case Keenum going up against the Minnesota Vikings at home in a game in which they just kind of got embarrassed a little bit by Marvin Jones last week. I expect them to come out this week and do their best to lock down that offense of the Washington Redskins. I'm going to go ahead and sit Case Keenum. Seahawks and Falcons up next. I'm going to start Russell Wilson here. Obviously, he's one of the best fantasy quarterbacks here in 2019, and this is a great matchup going up against a very porous defense of the Atlanta Falcons, giving up just under 25 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Great upside, great floor for Russell Wilson once again this week. On the Falcons side of things, not overly interested in either. There are actually rumors going around that Matt Ryan could play this weekend. Makes no sense to me. Even if he does, I wouldn't start him. The last thing you want is a whole David Johnson scenario. They start Matt Ryan. He goes out a series or two, realizes he can't go, and misses the rest of the game, giving you a big fat goose egg on your lineup. No thank you, I'm passing. If they start Matt Schaub, I think he'll be enough of a game manager to keep the Falcons maybe in the game, but that ceiling, that upside, I don't see it here this week. Neither one of these guys from Atlanta are going to be in one of my starting lineups. Broncos and Colts up next. I'm going to start Jacoby Brissett. He's really exceeded a lot of expectations here in 2019 after the departure of one Andrew Luck. But this is a difficult matchup going up against Denver. Right now, the Broncos only allow on average 11.2 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, but I do believe the Colts have enough weapons to spread around to where they're kind of avoiding Chris Harris, which is the top defender there for the Broncos on the outside. He may limit T.Y. Hilton, but Zach Pascal, maybe even Eric Ebron has himself a big week this week. Looking for that here to really give Jacoby Brissett that safe floor, have him as a start. Joe Flacco, not going to start Joe Flacco. There is no Emmanuel Sanders. Not that that's a huge deal. Deshaun Hamilton will pick up some of that slack, but I don't think going up against the Colts right now, who do average 18.5 fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks, this isn't really the type of offense in Denver that has that safe floor. The floor for Joe Flacco is way low. Hopefully you don't have to depend on it, because right now Joe Flacco is not starting in any lineup that I have. Bucks and Titans up next, and I'm going to start both Jameis Winston and Ryan Tannehill. Now for Jameis Winston, they're going to have to throw the ball. There isn't much of a running game in Tampa Bay, not the greatest offensive line, and plus it's a pretty tough run defense of the Tennessee Titans. He's got Chris Godwin on the outside. He's got Mike Evans on the outside. Maybe there's an O.J. Howard sighting. Maybe it's just Cameron Brate. Again, there are options for him to throw the ball to. Now, does he have that interception tendency? Yes, he does. However, he also has that high touchdown upside that can kind of counteract those interceptions at times. Look at it this way. If he's throwing interceptions and Tennessee's scoring points, it's going to allow him to continue to throw the ball all game long, giving him that higher ceiling and the possibility of garbage points, which help win fantasy championships. I don't care what anybody else says. Ryan Tannehill has opened up the passing offense also of the Tennessee Titans. We know about Corey Davis and A.J. Brown, Delaney Walker. You know, the addition of Ryan Tannehill in this offense has really opened things up to the point now where you have to respect the passing game. It's not just Derrick Henry every single week. This is a lot better matchup for Ryan Tannehill because right now the Buccaneers giving up over 21 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. I really like Ryan Tannehill as a streamer here in Week 8. Cardinals and Saints up now in a battle of two teams that both give up over 20 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. We know the Cardinals are going to throw the ball. Right now, Kyler Murray, 6th in the NFL in pass attempts, and their pace of play is up there tops in the league also. They're going to run a lot of plays. They're going to throw the ball a lot, and they're going to have to this week. It sounds like there may not be David Johnson here. Maybe, hopefully, something we don't have to worry about. So how does that run game struggle against a very tough run defense of the Saints? They may rely a little bit more on the passing game, and that's what we're looking for from Kyler Murray, plus the rushing upside. Now, on the Saints side of the ball, there's talks and rumors coming around that Drew Brees could return this week. I don't know why he would do that against the Arizona Cardinals. Teddy Bridgewater still playing more than exceptional football and putting W's up on the board for the Saints. Why rush back Drew Brees in this style of game? If he plays, I'm not overly excited to start him. Same kind of situation with Matt Ryan. What if he goes out there, takes one hit, and realizes he can't finish the game? That is a huge risk that I'm not willing to take at this point of the fantasy season. I'll start Teddy Bridgewater all day long against the Cardinals, but if Drew Brees starts, I'm going to temper expectations and more than likely look somewhere else. Bengals and Rams up next over in London, and I usually don't like London games very much, but I'm still going to start Jared Goff. He's got too many pieces, too many weapons in this offense to not take advantage of the poor defense of the Cincinnati Bengals. It can be through the passing game or the running game, the short passing game. He has options, but right now, the Bengals give up on average 21.9 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, and Jared Goff, like I said, has enough weapons to really make, a solid fantasy day out of it. Now, for the Bengals, I'm not touching Andy Dalton. No thank you. Not with that offensive line and this defensive front of the Los Angeles Rams. I expect him to be under pressure all day long and doing his best just to get the ball out of his hands. We already know they have no resemblance of a running game with Joe Mixon. I'm avoiding Andy Dalton here in Week 8. All right, next up, we got a matchup between the Eagles and the Bills, or what I like to call it, pissing off an entire fan base in less than 30 seconds. Because I'm going to start Josh Allen still against the Philadelphia Eagles. That secondary is horrific. They give up more points to fantasy wide receivers than any other team. And as of right now, they're giving up almost 20 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. We know the rushing upside is there for Josh Allen. This is a very much improved Buffalo team. And with the weapons he has on the outside, he has that safe floor. Now, for Carson Wentz, I'm going to sit Carson Wentz going up against the Buffalo Bills, and a lot of people are probably going to get pissed off about that. But Carson Wentz has been really up and down here as of late, and Buffalo only allows 13 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Now, the problem here may not entirely be Carson Wentz. It's really the lack of an established run game. They can't commit to one running back and really pound the ball. And then they have wide receivers out there like Nelson Aguilar who really don't make an effort to catch a catchable ball. Those are the types of things that are really hurting Carson Wentz right now. It's not him as a player. It's the surrounding cast that's really hurting him. And I'm going to sit him here again in Week 8. Chargers and Bears up next. Still going to start Phillip Rivers. Still a safer play here for Week 8. Not the same old Bears defense that we're used to seeing. And he has so many weapons at his disposal. Eckler, Gordon, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Hunter Henry. There's a lot of options. Too many good options to keep them down much longer. They're going to figure it out. The offense kind of hit a snag when Melvin Gordon came back. They're kind of trying to figure out how to work him back into the game plan. At some point, That's going to happen, and this offense is going to start putting up points again. You don't want to miss out on, I like Phillip Rivers here this week. Now, for Mitch Trubisky, I don't care that he threw the ball 50-some times last week. That's how the Bears lose games, is by Mitch Trubisky throwing the ball 50-some times last week. But they do allow just about 15, 16 fantasy points a game to the Chargers, to opposing quarterbacks. The problem is there's no identity to this team in Chicago. They're not committed to the run. They're really not committed to the pass to one wide receiver outside of Allen Robinson. It's very, disorganized offense. And until they can really figure out what they want to be, I'm going to sit Mitch Trubisky, even though I do believe at some point, once they figure this out, Mitch Trubisky could be a solid fantasy quarterback at some point, just not in Week 8. Giants and Lions up next. Another two teams that give up right around 20 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. And I'm going to continue to start Matt Stafford here. Now, hopefully the reemergence of Marvin Jones, it's like all of a sudden Matthew Stafford had an epiphany and he remembered that Marvin Jones was a wide receiver on his team. Got him over-involved last week. If they can equal that back out and really get him and Galladay going together, remember, there's no Kerryon Johnson. Ty Johnson's going to be in the backfield with J.D. McKissic this week, and it's not going to be one of those backfields that can really handle a heavy workload on the ground. They're not going to go out there and run the ball 20, 30 times a game. They're going to have to continue to throw the ball through the air, and this is the perfect opportunity for them to do it against the New York Giants secondary. Now, for the Giants, I'd rather start Danny Ainge at quarterback than I would Daniel Jones right now. And most of you probably watching are like, who the heck is Danny Ainge? He's a basketball player from like the 80s and 90s. That's how bad he's playing right now at the quarterback position. I'm not really interested in. Part of it isn't his fault. There isn't a whole lot of weapons at his disposal. Evan Ingram's been banged up. There's no Sterling Shepard. It's basically just Golden Tate at times. It's nice that he has Saquon Barkley back. He could do a lot of check down passes to him, but he really is dependent on him breaking a big play to give him that higher ceiling. I'm going to sit Daniel Jones until they can figure out that offense in New York and get the guys some more weapons. Jets and Jags up next. I'm starting both of these guys, both Gardner Minshew and Sam Darnold. Now, that may be a little bit of a surprise for some people, scratching their head, why is Sam Darnold the start? Well, the Jags give up over 18 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. There's no more Jalen Ramsey there. And just because he looked horrible against the New England Patriots, there's a lot of quarterbacks that are going to look horrible against that defense. He starts to turn it around here second half of the season this week, going up against the Jaguars. I expect Demaryius Thomas, Robbie Anderson, Jamison Crowder, even Le'Veon Bell to start the turnaround here this week and really start putting forth some fantasy points. It may not, turn into wins for the Jets so much in real football, but as far as fantasy goes, the upside starts this week. I'm going to throw Sam Darnold back in if I need a quarterback. And Gardner Minshew, his days are numbered, right? Nick Foles is coming back at some point. Kind of hate to see it at this point. Really like Gardner Minshew and what he's brought to this offense. But right now, the Jets only allow 16 fantasy points per game. So his ceiling is somewhat capped. But he has that rushing upside. He can go out there and get 40, 50 yards rushing on any given day. He's got plenty of weapons at his disposal with D.D. Westbrook and DJ Chark. Leonard Fournette establishing the run game in the backfield. Definitely another solid game expected out of Gardner Minshew. And I'm going to start him here once again this week. Panthers and Niners up next, and I don't want any part of the quarterback position in this game. Kyle Allen going up against that elite San Francisco defense and pass rush. I'm not really on board with that right now. There's other options out there. I'm sure you're not counting on Kyle Allen at this point anyway. Jimmy G just got himself Emmanuel Sanders. How involved is he here this week? That remains to be seen. Give it one more week. Maybe starting in week 9, if they continue to throw the ball maybe a little bit more in San Francisco, he'll get more value. But right now, they're the top rushing team in the NFL. They run the ball more than anybody, and that really limits the upside of Jimmy G. So for that reason, I'm sitting both of these guys here in week 8. Raiders and Texans up next, and I'm going to start both of these guys, both Deshaun Watson and Derek Carr, especially now that it looks like Tyrell Williams will be back for the Oakland Raiders. Just make sure you monitor those practice reports here throughout the weekend, but it sounds like he's coming back. That's music to the ears of Derek Carr, especially in a matchup like this, going up against the Houston Texans, who allowed 21 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. I like Derek Carr for a bounce-back week this week. Also, like usual, you're starting Deshaun Watson. It's a lot easier to throw on the Raiders than it is to run on them, and right now, they're giving up on average 23.5 fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. If you needed another reason to start Deshaun Watson, that's it. He should have another bounce-back week and another solid fantasy week for you here in Week 8. Browns and Patriots up now. I'm going to start Tom Brady, and I have a feeling this may be one of those games for the New England Patriots where they come out and kind of make a statement, right? A lot of people, including myself, hyped up the Browns in the offseason and what could be with this offense. A lot of people wanted to crown them back in the preseason. Well, the Patriots are having none of it. They are by far the best team right now in the NFL, and I have a feeling they're going to come out and make a statement this week at home in Foxborough. That's not what we want, is an angry or motivated Patriots team at this point. So Tom Brady's going to be a start with all the weapons that he has. The newly acquired Mohamed Sanu, whether he's really involved, kind of remains to be seen, similar to the whole Emmanuel Sanders situation in San Francisco. But Mohamed Sanu is just another weapon for this team, right? They already have Julian Edelman and Philip Dorsett, Jacoby Myers. Ben Watson got into the mix a little bit last week. James White, he has, options all over the field. And even though sometimes his ceiling is limited because the defense is so good, they get big leads. This may be that week where they go out there and try to put up a big number on a team that had a lot of preseason hype. I'm going to sit Baker Mayfield, though. In case you haven't noticed, this defense is ridiculous. And the last thing you want to do is throw in a quarterback that has already struggled prior to the bye week. Hopefully they went in there and figured some things out here this past week while they were off. But I don't want to come and find out this week during the Patriots. They're only allowing 6.3 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. I'm passing on Baker Mayfield. Hopefully they got it figured out, but I'll look at him again in week 9. Packers and Chiefs here, and what could have been the matchup of Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes may be the matchup of Aaron Rodgers and Matt Moore, which just doesn't sound as cool. Now, they haven't ruled out Patrick Mahomes yet. They have to do that. The guy just dislocated his kneecap a week ago. There's no way he plays in this game. If he does, Andy Reid may be a lot dumber than I thought he was. There's just no way, especially when the guy had a bum ankle to begin with. Give him a few weeks to rest it. So if that's the case, Matt Moore will be under center for the Kansas City Chiefs. And how much can we really expect out of him? Well, Green Bay right now only allows 15.1 fantasy points per game. I have to think that they really rely on the running game and short check down passes this week, which kind of limits those big plays. Yes, last week he had a big play at the end of the game to Tyreek Hill, which really saved Tyreek Hill's day. But I don't want to go in there reliant on that big play to get that safe floor. Just because he's on a great offense doesn't mean he's going to put up huge numbers. I'm going to sit Matt Moore here this week. Aaron Rodgers, going to be an automatic must start, right? Playing a lot better football here as of late. Chiefs give up almost 19 fantasy points per game. The ceiling may be also somewhat capped for Rodgers, though. If the Chiefs struggle to score the ball, Rodgers may get a lead there in the first half and maybe rely a little bit more on Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams second half. If that's the case, we need him to score all those fantasy points in the first 2 to 3 quarters. He can do it. This team has weapons. Doesn't look like Devontae Adams will be back, but MVS had a full practice here today, so he should be good to go going forward. Going to start Aaron Rodgers, and hopefully they rest Patrick Mahomes because we need that guy down the stretch here for fantasy football. Dolphins and Steelers Monday Night Football. I'm going to start Mason Rudolph. Why? Because we start everybody against the Dolphins because usually they suck every Sunday. Right now they're giving up on average over 24 fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Mason Rudolph back after a couple weeks off, a bye week, and getting knocked out in a past game. But now he comes back. Sounds like James Washington could be back. We already know about Deontay Johnson, and they got to get Juju going. James Conner's been really effective through the passing game out of the backfield. He has options in a great matchup. Going to start Mason Rudolph. But on the other side, Ryan Fitzmagic. I really, really want to start him. He may be one of my favorite fantasy football players. Heck, one of my favorite football players in general. The guy is just fun to watch. He's so full of energy. It's hard not to root for Ryan Fitzpatrick, but unfortunately, he plays on the Dolphins. And even though he's put up some decent numbers here recently, I don't know if I want to throw him out there on Monday Night Football against a Steelers team that only allows 16 fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. He really has only Devontae Parker, no running game. I want to start him, but I think it's just too much of a risk. I'm going to sit Fitzmagic here in Week 8. All right, those are my starts and sits here for Week 8 fantasy football for the quarterback position. Let me know down below what you think. Maybe we disagree, and that's okay. If we always agreed, these videos would have no purpose in watching, but greatly appreciate that support. Make sure you go down the description down below. There's a link where we're giving away $1,000. You want a chance to win it? Click the link, watch the video, leave a comment, and you're entered. It's that easy. You don't have any, red tape, no No catch, no fine print, nothing like that. It's just a way to enter in a drawing to win $1,000. Looking forward to doing that on October 31st. But hopefully you guys have a great rest of your week, a great weekend, and we'll talk to you later.